Captain Emily Harper had flown hundreds of flights out of Charlotte Douglas International Airport, each one following the same predictable rhythm. Passengers bustling through the terminal, the low hum of trolleys and rolling suitcases, the quiet but efficient announcements over the intercom. She liked the routine. It made her feel in control. Today, though, something tugged at the edge of her awareness, a subtle tension she couldn't name. Flight 319, a Tuesday afternoon flight to Denver, was scheduled to carry 183 passengers, most of them business travelers and families. Emily ran through the pre-flight checklist as always, ticking boxes with precision, her eyes scanning the cockpit instruments with the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years mastering this metal bird. The boarding process was ordinary. Travelers with overstuffed carry-ons shuffled along the aisle, rolling eyes at toddlers, yawning at seat assignments. A young couple, clearly on vacation, laughed quietly at something on their phones, oblivious to the world outside the jetway. An elderly man in a navy cap adjusted his coat, muttering a gentle complaint about the airport coffee. A toddler tugged at her mother's sleeve, looking wide-eyed at the plane's interior, fascinated by the blinking lights and the hum of the ventilation. Emily observed all this from her cockpit window, noting the lives that would soon be in her hands. Each person was a story, a heartbeat, a fragile thread in the web of human existence. She always felt it, this strange, almost spiritual weight, when she knew she was responsible for so many lives at once. Routine, right? First Officer Jamal Davis broke her reverie, his voice warm but carrying a subtle tension of his own. He was younger than Emily, recently promoted to co-pilot and full of energy and enthusiasm. Emily smiled tightly, adjusting her headset. Routine, she replied, though a flicker of unease passed over her mind. They pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life, vibrating through the fuselage. Outside, the sky was a perfect shade of pale blue, dotted with clouds that seemed harmless, innocent. The takeoff was smooth, the plane lifting gracefully from the runway, leaving the familiar hum of Charlotte behind. Passengers relaxed into their seats, some adjusting their headphones, others staring out the windows at the patchwork of roads and fields below. Emily felt the usual mix of calm and anticipation. Flying was never entirely peaceful. It was controlled chaos, beauty tempered by danger. As Flight 319 climbed above the clouds, Emily ran her eyes across the instruments. Everything was normal. Altitude, speed, engine performance, each indicator confirmed a smooth journey. Jamal handled the radio check, confirming communication with Denver approach, and Emily felt herself relax into the rhythm she knew so well. She glanced at the cabin through the monitors. Families were chatting, some passengers napped, a few stared at their phones. Life continued, oblivious to the vast skis that carried them. Then just as they leveled off at 35,000 feet, a strange flicker crossed her radar screen. Emily's brow furrowed. It was subtle, a shadow moving faster than any weather pattern should. She leaned forward, squinting at the instruments. "Jamal, do you see that?" He leaned over, eyes narrowing. "See what?" "The radar, something passed over the mountains fast, too fast, and it's irregular, not typical weather, nothing I recognize." Her voice was calm, but a chill ran down her spine. Jamal leaned closer, scanning the readings. The color-coded blips on the radar shifted, unusual spikes and distortions that made neither of them comfortable. "Maybe it's just a glitch," he suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Emily shook her head. She had flown long enough to know when a system was lying to her, or worse, when nature was about to make her pay for complacency. She tapped the controls, double-checking everything. The instruments confirmed the anomaly, repeating the warning in numbers and graphs. As she stared at the display, she noticed movement in the cabin monitors. A mother was soothing her child. A man across the aisle adjusted his seatbelt. Life continued, ordinary, fragile, unsuspecting. Emily felt a strange tightening in her chest, a premonition that the day would not stay ordinary. A sudden jolt shook the plane, not violent but enough to make passengers glance nervously at each other. The hum of the engines faltered for a fraction of a second. A mother whispered, "What was that?" Emily gripped the yoke lightly, checking the instruments. Everything seemed fine on paper, but experience told her something was wrong. The storm wasn't on the radar yet, she couldn't see it. Yet she felt it, a tremor in the air, a warning in the way the plane shifted mid-flight. She took a deep breath. Flight 319 was her responsibility. She had been trained for emergencies, for turbulence, for mechanical failures. But intuition, Emily knew, was just as important as training. She glanced at Jamal, whose fingers hovered over the throttle tense. "Stay sharp," she said softly. "Something coming." Outside, the clouds shifted. A faint gray streak appeared on the horizon, barely perceptible. But Emily noticed it, the way the light refracted, the subtle swirl of air currents. The storm was forming faster than anyone could predict. Her pulse quickened. Every passenger aboard Flight 319 was counting on her. Every life was in her hands. And then it hit. A violent lurch, sharper than anything she had felt before, jolted the plane. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as a wave of panic surged through the cabin. Passengers screamed, gasped, some frozen with terror. Jamal's knuckles whitened on the controls. Lightning split the sky outside the windows, illuminating the panic-stricken faces. Emily fought to steady the plane, her mind moving a mile a minute, calculating altitude, speed, wind currents, and the sheer randomness of the storm. The plane rocked again, violently. A woman in the aisle cried out, clutching her armrest. A man muttered, "God help us." Emily's voice cut through the chaos, firm but calm. "Everyone stay in your seats, fasten your seatbelts. We'll get through this." Her words barely registered above the roar of the engines and the screams of the passengers, but she repeated them, steady and unwavering. Her hands gripped the yoke like a lifeline, pulling and adjusting, compensating for each violent shift. Jamal coordinated with air traffic control, reporting turbulence and monitoring engine performance. The readings flickered with each lurch of the aircraft, warning lights illuminating and then disappearing. Emily's heart hammered. This was no ordinary flight, no routine turbulence. She had flown through storms before, but this one had a mind of its own, erratic, punishing, unpredictable. She scanned the instruments again. A shadow passed over the mountains. Faster, closer. She didn't yet know what it was, but instinct screamed at her that Flight 319's ordinary flight had ended. Somewhere deep in the cabin, a toddler whimpered, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder. A businessman gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus, to think, to survive. And then the plane lurched violently once more, as if gripped by an invisible hand. Every passenger on Flight 319 felt it, the moment when the ordinary world disappeared, replaced by raw, unfiltered danger. Emily's knuckles tightened on the controls, her jaw set. She glanced at Jamal. He mirrored her resolve, eyes wide but determined. The storm had arrived. The shadow on the radar was not just a storm, it was something far more immediate, far more threatening. Flight 319 was no longer a routine flight. And Emily Harper, captain, pilot, protector, had just begun the fight for 183 lives she would never forget. The moment the plane lurched violently, Flight 319 descended into chaos. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling, swinging like pendulums in the turbulent air. Passengers scrambled to secure them, hands shaking, hearts hammering. A mother grabbed her child, whispering desperate prayers, while a businessman clutched his seatbelt so tightly his knuckles went pale. The roar of engines mixed with screams and the sharp crack of lightning outside the windows, and Emily Harper, captain of this airborne storm, felt a surge of adrenaline unlike anything she had experienced before. "Brace for turbulence," Emily shouted, her voice steady over the cockpit intercom, but it barely penetrated the cacophony of panic. Jamal Davis, her co-pilot, fought to stabilize the yoke, the plane shuddering violently with every gust of wind. Instruments flickered, warning lights blinking like frantic heartbeats. She adjusted the throttle, banking sharply to compensate for the gusts that threatened to rip them off course. Her mind raced. Engine 1 showing slight fluctuation. Engine 2's temperature spiking. Fuel flow unstable. Not a single variable could be ignored. A streak of lightning split the sky outside. Its brilliance illuminated the cabin in stroboscopic flashes, revealing pale, terrified faces pressed against windows, passengers clinging to armrests, mouths open in silent screams. Emily's eyes flicked between the radar and the instruments. Something unnatural was happening. This wasn't normal turbulence. The storm had intelligence. It followed them, anticipated every evasive maneuver, as if the sky itself were conspiring against them. Jamal leaned closer, voice tight. "Captain, we're losing some instrument readings. Engine 2, it's fluctuating too much." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "Keep us level. Don't let the wings drop. Focus on control. We can't fight the storm yet. We have to survive it." She fought to steady her breathing. Her mind, trained for emergencies, snapped into overdrive. Scenarios flashed across her consciousness. Emergency landing on a frozen lake, power loss mid-flight, the possibility of hitting the mountains. But she had passengers to protect, lives depending on split-second decisions. Each heartbeat mattered. In the cabin, the panic intensified. A man shouted for help, thinking the plane was going to fall apart. A child's terrified scream cut through the noise, joined by the sobs of parents trying to comfort them. The plane's fuselage groaned under the stress, vibrations rattling overhead bins. Flight attendants gripped handles and straps, their faces pale but determined, trying to calm what was increasingly uncontrollable. Emily forced herself to focus. "Jamal, check altitude. We're too high for a glide if engines fail. We may need to descend to avoid the worst turbulence." He nodded, fingers dancing over the instruments. "I'm on it, but the readings." Lightning struck nearby and the plane rocked violently. One of the engines coughed, sputtering ominously. Smoke indicators blinked, alarms sounded. Emily's stomach dropped. This was no longer just a storm. Something had struck near the aircraft, close enough to disrupt engine performance. Her hands gripped the yoke, knuckles white, as she fought to keep the plane level, eyes scanning the instruments like a hawk. Passengers were screaming now, some crying, some frozen in disbelief. Emily's voice rose above the chaos, calm and commanding. "Remain in your seats. Fasten your seatbelts. Follow instructions. We are trained to survive this." Her voice was a lifeline, but even she felt the panic creep in, the fear of losing control gnawing at her confidence. A young boy, maybe 8, pressed his face against the window, watching the streaks of lightning as though trying to understand the storm. Emily caught the sight, and her chest tightened. "All 183 of them. I have to get them through this." Jamal's voice cracked slightly over the intercom. "Captain, Engine 2 is failing. Partial power loss." Emily's heart skipped. The moment of truth had arrived. With only one engine responding fully, the aircraft's glide potential was dangerously compromised. She visualized every landing procedure she had ever memorized. Training collided with instinct. She had only seconds to make a decision: climb, fight, or descend into controlled chaos. Every passenger's life weighed on her shoulders. Outside the cockpit, the storm intensified, wrapping the plane in sheets of rain and blinding flashes of lightning. The turbulence became almost physical, tossing the plane like a toy. Emily adjusted the controls, banking, pitching, twisting, fighting against the elements with every ounce of skill she had. Sweat stung her eyes, blurring her vision. Jamal was on the radio, trying to get a message through to Denver Approach. His voice trembled slightly but remained professional, like a lifeline tethered to reality. Suddenly the storm seemed to shift, as though aware of their attempts to escape. The aircraft lurched violently again, instruments flickering and a warning light glared, Engine 1 showing strain. Emily's stomach sank. Not both, not now. Then, cutting through the roar of wind and engines, a crackling voice came over the radio, tense and clipped. "Flight 319, we are tracking severe anomalies in your flight path. Do you copy?" Emily's eyes widened. This wasn't just a routine traffic check. Anomalies, her pulse quickened. She responded immediately, "Flight 319, we copy. Please clarify what anomalies." The response was calm, almost too calm for the urgency in the cockpit. "Data indicates extreme atmospheric turbulence and irregular electromagnetic activity. Advise extreme caution. Maintain control. Support is tracking." Emily exchanged a look with Jamal, whose jaw was tight. They both understood the implication. This was no ordinary storm. Something else, something unknown, was interacting with the aircraft. Lightning struck again, closer this time, illuminating the jagged mountains below and the frozen valleys stretching out like a jagged puzzle. The plane shook violently, and passengers screamed in unison. Emily felt the weight of every scream, every prayer, every fragile heartbeat in that cabin. She swallowed, forcing herself to breathe steadily. This was not a scenario from a simulator. This was life and death, and I am the only one who can navigate it. Her eyes flicked to Jamal. "We need to descend," she said, voice firm. "Stay focused. Follow my instructions. We will glide through this, but we need altitude control first. We need a clear line." He nodded, fingers flying over the instruments. Together, they tilted the plane into a careful, calculated descent. Every adjustment precise, every movement critical. Emily visualized the frozen lake below, a potential landing site if the engines failed entirely. Her mind raced through calculations: glide ratio, wind speed, engine output. She mentally mapped the maneuver like a chessboard, each step leading toward survival. In the cabin, a mother clutched her child tightly. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, even as tears ran down her face. Emily wanted to believe her own words. She had to. Every person depended on it. Lightning struck again, blinding, illuminating fear-stricken faces, and the plane shuddered violently, groaning under the stress. Emily's grip on the yoke was white-knuckled, muscles straining. Every second stretched into an eternity, the minutes warping as adrenaline surged. And then a sickening pop echoed through the fuselage, a sharp, metallic snap that sounded like a warning bell. Emily froze. Jamal's eyes met hers, wide and horrified. Something inside the plane had broken. The instruments flickered dangerously. The engines were on the brink. Emily Harper, captain, protector of 183 lives, forced herself to breathe. She whispered a vow she didn't speak aloud but felt in every fiber of her being. "We will survive. We will make it." The plane lurched once more, and for a moment the world seemed to hang in perfect, terrifying suspension. Outside, the storm roared, indifferent to human fear. Inside, 183 souls clutched at hope, unaware of the skill, courage, and sheer willpower that now controlled their fate. And Emily, heart hammering, eyes wide and unblinking, knew one truth above all: the ordinary flight was over. The real fight had just begun. The alarms in the cockpit blared relentlessly, a chorus of red lights and piercing sounds that seemed to echo the chaos in the cabin. Engine 2's output continued to fluctuate, Engine 1 strained, and the turbulence showed no mercy. Flight 319 groaned under the stress, the metal fuselage shivering as if alive with fear. Emily Harper's jaw was tight, her eyes scanning the instruments, her mind a storm of calculations and instinct. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Every second mattered. One wrong move could cost 183 lives. "Captain, we're losing altitude faster than I can compensate," Jamal shouted over the roar of engines and the wail of the wind outside. His fingers gripped the yoke, shaking but steady, each movement deliberate. Emily's hands mirrored his, adjusting and compensating, trying to counteract forces she couldn't control. Lightning illuminated the cockpit intermittently, painting their focused faces in stark white flashes. The frozen valley below loomed closer with every passing second, jagged mountain peaks threatening to shred the wings of the aircraft if they miscalculated. Emily's mind raced through scenarios she had drilled 1,000 times in simulators: emergency landing, glide calculations, partial engine failure procedures, all blurred together in the chaos. She remembered the stories her father had told her as a child, about the pilots who had gone down in history because they refused to surrender to fear. This is my moment, she thought. No one else can save them but me. Altitude control, glide ratio, trajectory, she muttered under her breath, almost mechanically. She tapped into every ounce of training, every past flight experience and instinctive knowledge of the aircraft. She scanned the frozen lake below, a patch of silver ice nestled between jagged ridges. It was her only real chance if both engines failed. But it was far from guaranteed. Ice could crack, trees bordered the edges, and the high winds could send the plane spinning into oblivion. Jamal's voice broke through her focus. "Captain, we need to make a choice. We can attempt a controlled descent to the lake, but if we miscalculate, it's catastrophic. Do you want to do it?" Emily's eyes never left the windshield. She saw the clouds swirling in unnatural formations, the storm twisting around them, almost intelligent in its pursuit. She considered the passengers, families, businessmen, a toddler clinging to his mother, elderly travelers who had spent decades trusting planes like hers to keep them safe. Each face was a story, each life irreplaceable. I can't fail them, she thought. Her stomach churned, fear gnawing at the edges of her focus, but she forced it aside. We save them all or we go down trying, she said, voice firm, almost a whisper to herself. Then louder over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. We're experiencing severe turbulence. Follow all safety instructions. We will navigate through this together. Her words, calm and commanding, were a lifeline, though she knew the passengers didn't yet understand the gravity of the storm. Lightning split the sky again, closer this time, the jagged bolts illuminating the peaks and valleys below in stark white flashes. Emily's hands danced over the yoke, adjusting the plane's tilt and banking angle with precision, each micro-movement calculated to preserve control. Jamal monitored the engines, his brow furrowed in concentration. Engine 1 was holding, but barely. Engine 2's fluctuations were becoming critical. A loud metallic pop echoed through the cockpit, a warning that made both pilots flinch. Something inside the plane had failed, sending a shudder through the fuselage. Emily forced herself to stay calm. Panic was the enemy. Instinct and skill were their only allies. She visualized the frozen lake below, mapping the descent in her mind like a chessboard. Every calculation mattered: wind speed, descent angle, glide ratio, thrust from the remaining engine. One misstep, and the plane could spin, crash, or break apart midair. Jamal's voice trembled slightly. "Captain, Engine 2 is failing entirely. We may not have enough power to maintain altitude. We need to act now." Emily's stomach dropped. The moment of decision had arrived. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and locked eyes with Jamal. He nodded, trusting her judgment, knowing the gravity of what they were about to attempt. She swiveled her chair slightly, adjusting her focus to the ice-covered lake below, the only possible landing zone in a valley that seemed both distant and impossible. "Prepare for emergency descent," she said, voice sharp but controlled. "Brace yourselves. We're going to glide it down. Everyone, stay calm, stay seated, follow instructions. We may be fighting gravity and the storm, but we will survive." The passengers had no idea what was coming. In the cabin, oxygen masks swung with the turbulence, overhead bins rattled, and cries of fear mixed with whispered prayers. A mother clutched her child to her chest, rocking slightly in time with the plane's shuddering movements. A businessman muttered incomprehensible words, his face pale, knuckles white. The reality of survival pressed down on them, though they could not yet grasp the full scope of what Emily and Jamal faced in the cockpit. Emily adjusted the controls, banking the aircraft carefully. Lightning struck nearby, a blinding flash illuminating the valley below. The frozen lake shimmered, a narrow stretch of silver ice framed by jagged mountains. Her heart pounded. She calculated the descent path, accounting for wind, storm, turbulence, and the limited power of the engines. She instructed Jamal on throttle adjustments, compensating for the partial loss of engine function. Every second was a battle, every maneuver a gamble. The plane lurched violently again, causing passengers to scream and clutch their armrests. Emily felt a metallic vibration under her hands, the plane protesting under stress, metal groaning, the instruments flickering wildly. She forced herself to breathe steadily, focusing only on the task at hand. One mistake, one misjudgment, and the consequences would be catastrophic. "Jamal, line up for the lake," she said, voice calm but urgent. "We descend at a 45-degree glide. Check wind speed, adjust slowly. No sudden movements. We land on ice, maintain control. We survive this." The plane trembled violently, and Emily felt the full force of the storm pressing against her. Lightning flashed directly ahead, illuminating jagged peaks that threatened to slice the wings if they misjudged altitude. She adjusted, tilting the aircraft, her muscles screaming with the effort. She could feel the weight of every soul on the plane, every prayer, every heartbeat. Failure was not an option. The cabin jolted again, the screams rising, and Emily's voice cut through like steel. "We are going to make it. Stay calm. Follow instructions." Jamal monitored the instruments, his fingers flying, eyes wide with the intensity of the moment. Engine 2's fluctuations were critical. Engine 1 strained to compensate. But Emily's calculations were precise, her instincts razor-sharp. She visualized the glide, mapping each second in her mind, guiding the plane as though it were an extension of herself. And then it happened. The plane stabilized just enough. Not entirely safe, but survivable. Emily allowed herself a brief glance at the frozen lake below. The stretch of ice seemed impossibly narrow, yet shimmering with possibility. This was their lifeline. Every calculation, every decision, every ounce of courage had led them to this point. But the storm was not done. Clouds twisted, gusts of wind howled, and the instruments flickered with violent warnings. Emily's pulse raced, sweat stinging her eyes. She whispered under her breath, "We save them all or we go down trying." The next move would decide everything. Emily Harper's heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. The frozen lake glimmered below through the violent streaks of lightning, a fragile strip of silver amidst the jagged mountains. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. Flight 319 was a metal bird groaning under strain, with only one engine holding. She adjusted the yoke, guiding the aircraft into the descent she had calculated in the previous agonizing moments. Every passenger's life hung on her every decision. "Brace for descent," she called over the intercom, her voice calm but firm. "Stay seated, stay calm, follow instructions. We are landing on ice. I repeat, landing on ice." Screams filled the cabin, mingled with muffled sobs and the rattling of overhead bins. Oxygen masks swung wildly, and passengers pressed their faces into seats or clutched loved ones. The storm outside screamed in rage, rain pelting windows, lightning illuminating terrified faces in stark, stroboscopic flashes. Emily's stomach tightened. She had rehearsed emergency landings countless times in simulators, but never on a frozen lake, under a storm this fierce, with engines failing mid-flight and hundreds of lives at stake. Jamal's voice trembled, tight with tension. "Captain, glide path is unstable, wind shear increasing. We're going to hit the first ridge in 30 seconds. Emily swallowed hard. 30 seconds. In that span, 100 variables would collide. Wind, ice, turbulence, engine power, the plane's weight, momentum. She adjusted the controls in micro-movements, guiding Flight 319 as delicately as a surgeon steering a scalpel. Sweat stung her eyes. The roar of the engines, the storm, the metal groaning under stress, it was deafening, overwhelming. And yet she remained hyper-focused. Below, the frozen lake beckoned, a slender ribbon of possibility framed by treacherous ridges. One wrong miscalculation, one tilt too steep, and the aircraft could veer off course, smashing into trees or shattering on the ice. Emily visualized the landing in her mind, calculating angles, glide speed, and wind compensation with machine-like precision. Every fraction of a second mattered. Lightning split the sky again, blinding and violent. The plane lurched violently. Passengers screamed, gripping armrests, mothers clutching children, fathers muttering prayers. Emily's hands gripped the yoke so tightly it ached, but she did not release control. Jamal monitored instruments, calling out minor adjustments. Bank left 3 degrees, descend another 5, engine temp rising. The aircraft trembled under the strain. Metal groaned like it was alive, protesting under the force of the storm and their desperate glide. Emily whispered under her breath, her mantra repeating like a heartbeat, "We survive, we survive, we survive." Ahead the ice shimmered, deceptively serene amid the storm's chaos. She adjusted the throttle, relying on the single functional engine to stabilize the descent. The lake's surface reflected streaks of lightning, a mirror of chaos and hope. Emily's mind raced through contingencies. If the ice cracks, if the wind gusts, if the remaining engine fails. She had trained for emergencies, but this was unprecedented. In the cabin, chaos reigned. Passengers clutched seatbelts, arms around loved ones, bracing for impact. A toddler whimpered softly, pressing into his mother's shoulder. The elderly man in the navy cap gripped his seat in silent terror. Emily imagined their faces as she maneuvered, each micro-adjustment calculated to maximize survival. 30 seconds, Jamal repeated, voice tight. "We're aligned with the lake, hold steady." Emily's pulse raced. 30 seconds to life or death. She adjusted pitch and bank in infinitesimal movements, guiding the plane with a surgeon's precision. Outside, jagged peaks loomed, ice-streaked ridges threatening to shear the wings if they misjudged altitude. She swallowed fear and pushed instinct into overdrive, trusting training, skill, and adrenaline to guide her. The plane trembled violently again as a gust hit, tilting the fuselage. Emily countered immediately, hands a blur on the yoke. Metal groaned, a harsh screech vibrating through the cabin. Passengers gasped in unison. The toddler whimpered, mother holding him tightly. Emily's focus narrowed. Every sound, every vibration, every flicker of instrument light became a critical signal. And then the first touch. The landing gear skidded across the icy surface of the lake. Emily adjusted instantaneously, fighting for balance, countering momentum and compensating for the violent gusts that threatened to spin the plane. The fuselage shuddered, metal screaming under stress. Her stomach twisted with tension, but she held her course, micro-adjusting continuously. The plane skidded, controlled but frighteningly fast across the ice. Sparks flew as landing gear met uneven ice patches. Passengers held their breath, some crying, some silently praying, others gripping each other with terrified gratitude. Emily's voice remained calm, though her body trembled. "Hold steady, maintain composure. We are safe, almost." Jamal's fingers flew over the throttles, helping stabilize the glide. Engine 1 strained but held, providing the crucial thrust needed to keep Flight 319 from veering off into the surrounding ridges. Emily's mind calculated angles, speed, friction, and weight distribution simultaneously, the seconds stretching into eternities. The plane approached the narrowest part of the lake, a stretch of ice barely wide enough to accommodate the fuselage. Emily's eyes darted from instrument to horizon, from speed indicator to angle of descent, adjusting minute fractions of a degree. The fuselage groaned under the extreme stress. Sparks flew as metal scraped against ice in some areas, jarring passengers. A mother whispered, "Please, God." The voice was small, fragile, but Emily imagined it as part of the collective heartbeat she was protecting. Every life on board depended on her precision, her skill, her courage. One miscalculation now, and all of them would be lost. The plane slid across the lake's frozen surface, skimming the ice with astonishing delicacy given the circumstances. Emily fought to counteract every gust, every vibration, every minor deviation. The mountain ridges loomed ever closer, threatening to trap them against a wall of jagged rock. Every passenger felt the precarious balance of life and death with each second of sliding, shivering suspense. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the plane began to slow. The ice beneath them absorbed some momentum, and Emily carefully feathered the throttle, guiding the aircraft to a trembling, screeching stop. Silence, sudden and absolute, fell over the cabin, broken only by the quiet sobs of relief and the creaking of stressed metal. Emily Harper sat back slightly, breathing heavily, sweat stinging her eyes. Jamal exhaled in relief, wiping moisture from his forehead. They had done it. Against impossible odds, Flight 319 had survived the storm's first assault. Passengers stared at the frozen lake in disbelief, hearts racing, eyes wide with awe and terror. Mothers hugged children, businessmen whispered prayers, and even the elderly man in the Navy cap shook his head in stunned gratitude. But Emily didn't celebrate. She scanned the instruments again. One engine was still failing, turbulence wasn't over, and she knew instinctively that the storm had not yet released its grip. She allowed herself only a brief, steadying breath. 183 lives had survived this first miracle, but she knew the real challenge was not over. And as she glanced out at the swirling storm clouds, her pulse quickened once more. Something else was coming, something that the radar hadn't yet revealed, something beyond the storm, something that would change the course of Flight 319 forever. The ordinary world of travel, safety, and routine had ended. Flight 319 was no longer just a plane in the sky. It was a lifeboat in a tempest, and Emily Harper, captain, protector, and miracle worker, was its only hope. The tires of Flight 319 screeched across the ice as Emily Harper held the plane steady. Sparks danced along the edges where metal kissed frozen surface, and a symphony of groans and rattles echoed through the fuselage. Outside, the storm continued its chaotic assault, howling winds, sleeting ice, and violent flashes of lightning that fractured the sky. Emily's hands were white-knuckled on the yoke, every nerve alight with tension, her entire being focused on keeping the aircraft balanced on the fragile strip of frozen lake. Jamal adjusted the throttle in tandem with her movements. "Captain, we're slowing, but we're approaching the tree line at the far end." Emily's eyes scanned the narrow ribbon of ice ahead. The lake's surface glimmered with a deceptive calm, but jagged trees and hidden ridges lined its edges. One miscalculation, one sudden gust, and the plane could slide off the ice, spinning into jagged rocks. Her pulse hammered. Every passenger's life, 183 souls, hung on the precision of her every movement. "Steady, keep the nose slightly up, maintain momentum," Emily muttered, her voice taut with concentration. The plane slid a few more feet. She shifted the yoke subtly, using every ounce of remaining thrust and lift. The fuselage quivered, metal groaning in protest. Sparks flew from the landing gear, scraping ice ridges. In the cabin, passengers gasped, clinging to seats, hands pressed together in silent prayers. A mother whispered to her child, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," though her own voice trembled. An elderly man with a Navy cap muttered under his breath, gripping his seatbelt with white-knuckled intensity. The toddler pressed into his mother's shoulder, eyes wide, unsure whether to scream or cry. Every passenger was acutely aware of the fragility of life at this moment. Emily's mind raced with calculations. Glide path, ice friction, momentum, wind gusts, engine thrust, all had to be perfect. There was no room for error. The plane shuddered violently as a sudden gust of wind struck from the side, threatening to push them toward the jagged tree line. Emily's hands flew across the yoke, counteracting the shift with a precision honed by years of training. Jamal shouted over the roar of the engines and wind, "Captain, we're losing speed. Ice is uneven gear, slipping." Emily's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to focus. "Compensate with rudder, hold altitude as best you can. We're not done yet." She shifted the throttle slightly, coaxing the one functional engine to provide the lift and thrust needed to stabilize the descent. Time slowed, seconds stretching into eternities. Flight 319 slid across the ice like a vessel in a frozen river, metal screeching, wings trembling. Every passenger felt the tension, hearts pounding in unison. The toddler whimpered again, the mother's grip tightening, and every adult silently prayed that Emily's extraordinary skill would be enough to carry them through this impossible landing. Lightning struck again, illuminating the tree line ahead, stark and jagged. Emily's eyes locked on the horizon. She could see the end of the ice, the thin margin separating them from catastrophe. She whispered a steadying mantra under her breath, "We survive, we survive, we survive." Then disaster struck. A deep crack reverberated beneath the landing gear. Ice fissured, sending the aircraft jolting violently. Passengers screamed. Jamal shouted, "Captain, we're hitting unstable ice." Emily's hands were a blur on the yoke, every muscle taut with effort. She countered immediately, shifting weight distribution, adjusting pitch, coaxing the plane to remain balanced. Sparks flew from scraping metal. The fuselage groaned. The nose threatened to dip dangerously, but she fought it with all her strength. Every second was a battle between skill, instinct, and sheer will. Almost there, she muttered, forcing herself to remain calm even as adrenaline screamed through her veins. The plane skidded past the final jagged section of ice. Emily adjusted the rudder to guide them away from the bordering trees. The tires screeched, slowing incrementally as friction began to take hold. The passengers exhaled in unison, realizing they were not plunging into the forest or being swallowed by the ice. The frozen lake, perilous and unforgiving, had held them just long enough. Finally, Flight 319 came to a trembling, shuddering stop. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the groan of stressed metal and the faint, distant rumble of the storm. Emily released the yoke slightly, breathing heavily. Her muscles were sore, her heart hammering, but she allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had survived the impossible. 183 lives were intact. Jamal exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Captain, you did it. Everyone's alive." Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the cabin through the monitor. Passengers clutched one another, some crying, some laughing nervously. Mothers held children, fathers whispered prayers, and the elderly man in the navy cap simply shook his head, stunned and grateful. She allowed herself a small smile, though she knew the fight wasn't over. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The clouds twisted violently, winds howled across the icy valley, and flashes of lightning illuminated the frozen landscape in stark, terrifying clarity. Emily's eyes returned to the cockpit instruments. Engine 2 was failing entirely, and Engine 1 was strained to its limits. The turbulence had lessened on the lake, but the storm had not yet released its grip. Something else was coming, something she could not yet see, but instinct told her it was approaching. She turned to Jamal, who was still monitoring the instruments, voice tight with tension. "We need to secure the cabin, check for injuries, prepare for any further contingencies." Jamal nodded, urgency in his eyes. "Understood. Everyone's shaken, but they're alive for now." Emily allowed herself a brief glance at the passengers. Faces pale but grateful, hearts pounding, breath shaky. They stared out windows at the frozen lake, marveling at their survival. It was a moment of fragile calm, the kind that hangs between terror and relief. Every person aboard owed their life to the skill, courage, and determination of the captain who had guided them through impossible odds. But Emily didn't celebrate. She scanned the sky through the cockpit windows, senses alert. The storm had been just the first challenge. Her gut told her something else lurked, a presence she could not yet identify, an unknown variable she had no control over. The frozen lake had saved them from immediate disaster, but the world beyond it had not yet revealed its next threat. A low roar cut through the storm, unfamiliar and menacing. Emily's pulse quickened. She squinted into the clouds, trying to locate the source. Something sleek, fast, and impossibly close was moving with precision around Flight 319. It wasn't lightning or turbulence. It was deliberate. "Captain, do you see that?" Jamal's voice was tight, almost a whisper, but urgency underlined every word. Emily's eyes locked on the approaching object, a shadow slicing through the stormy sky. Her heart skipped. This wasn't part of any training, any protocol, or any simulator she had ever experienced. Flight 319 had survived the storm, but now a new threat had emerged, one that would demand skill, courage, and courage beyond reason. And Emily Harper knew, deep in her bones, that the fight was far from over. Emily Harper's eyes never left the horizon. The storm had subsided just enough for her to see beyond the frozen lake, but the unsettling presence she had sensed was unmistakable. High above, slicing through the gray clouds with terrifying precision, a sleek silhouette appeared. At first, she thought it was another storm anomaly, a trick of lightning and turbulence, but then it moved deliberately with purpose. Jamal's voice cut through the tension, trembling with disbelief. "Captain, that's a fighter jet, F-22, right above us." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The F-22's sharp, angular frame gleamed through intermittent lightning flashes, engines roaring with raw power. It moved in perfect coordination, circling Flight 319 as though analyzing, observing, calculating. Emily's mind raced. Why was a fighter jet here? This was a commercial airliner, no hostile activity, no signals, nothing to warrant military engagement. Yet here it was, a predator in the sky, demanding attention. She adjusted her headset, trying to reach Denver approach. "Denver Tower, Flight 319, do you read? We've had a successful emergency landing on the frozen lake, but we have a military aircraft in our vicinity, requesting immediate guidance." Static crackled over the radio, then a calm but authoritative voice replied, "Flight 319, we're aware. Do not attempt further takeoff. Maintain position. Air traffic is coordinating with NORAD. Military escort is assessing." Emily's stomach tightened. The situation had shifted from survival against the storm to something far more dangerous and unpredictable. Every passenger, unaware of the sky-high drama above them, was still recovering from the ice landing. They thought the worst was over. Emily knew better. The F-22 swooped closer, the jet's speed astonishing, its movement precise, like a predator circling its prey. Emily and Jamal exchanged a glance, understanding the silent warning the fighter's presence conveyed. The pilot of the F-22 knew their call sign. "Captain Harper, Flight 319, your call sign has been logged." A voice suddenly crackled over an encrypted military frequency, surprisingly direct. Emily stiffened, recognizing the call sign herself. "Phoenix." Her heart froze. The call sign was classified, known only to high-level military and air command. How had it been revealed? And why now, over a remote frozen lake, after she had just saved 183 lives from near-certain death? Jamal leaned over, eyes wide. "Phoenix, that's your call sign. How do they know?" Emily shook her head, unable to answer. Her mind raced through possibilities. Surveillance, military tracking, a protocol she hadn't been briefed on. But there was no time for confusion. The F-22 was approaching fast, its engines roaring, kicking up snow and ice particles from the frozen lake below. Its shadow stretched over Flight 319, massive and imposing, signaling authority, dominance, and urgency. "Maintain calm, Jamal. Let's assess. They're not hostile yet, but we need to communicate and comply until we understand their intent." Emily's voice was measured, controlled, training overriding panic. The F-22 pilot's voice came again over the secure channel. "Phoenix, Flight 319, identify yourself. Confirm emergency landing and number of passengers. Status of engines." Emily took a deep breath. "This is Captain Emily Harper, call sign Phoenix. We have successfully landed Flight 319 on a frozen lake. 183 passengers are alive. Engine 2 is non-operational. Engine 1 is functional but strained. We are stable for the moment." A pause followed. Emily could hear the roar of the F-22, feel its presence pressing down, a reminder of the thin line between survival and catastrophe. Then the pilot responded, "Copy, Phoenix. We are moving in to provide aerial support and ensure security. Hold position. You will receive further instructions." Emily exhaled, though tension remained taut in every muscle. She looked at Jamal. "We're not alone now, but there's still danger. The storm may have passed, but something else is here, military-grade and fast. We have to stay sharp." Outside, the F-22 executed tight maneuvers, circling Flight 319, scanning the aircraft with precision. Emily could see the pilot's helmet, reflective against the storm-darkened sky, but not the expression beneath. The jet's speed and agility were intimidating, a stark reminder that she was now operating in a space where human skill met cutting-edge technology. The frozen lake beneath them, previously a sanctuary, now seemed vulnerable. The ice creaked and groaned, snow swirling around Flight 319 as the F-22 kicked up turbulence in its wake. Every movement mattered. One miscalculation from the fighter could destabilize the plane, jeopardizing the lives Emily had just saved. "Passengers are starting to panic again," Jamal noted, eyes flicking to the cabin monitors. "They can feel the turbulence from the F-22. Emily nodded. She understood the fear. Their ordeal wasn't over. "Keep the plane level, minimize movements, communicate calmly." She pressed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. The emergency landing has been successful and we have support arriving. Remain in your seats, stay calm, and follow instructions. We are ensuring your safety." A murmur of uneasy compliance rippled through the cabin. Mothers held children closer, passengers tightened seatbelts, and the elderly man in the navy cap muttered prayers under his breath. Emily's voice, firm and calm, became their lifeline once again. The F-22 pilot's voice returned, calm but commanding. "Phoenix, Flight 319, prepare for guidance. We will assist in moving the aircraft to a secure area. You will receive instructions to taxi over ice to a reinforced zone nearby." Emily's heart pounded, adrenaline surging once again. "Understood," she replied. She adjusted the yoke, preparing to guide Flight 319 across the frozen lake with precise coordination with the F-22. The challenge was unprecedented, moving a commercial aircraft over ice with one engine, while a supersonic fighter provided aerial oversight. Jamal's voice trembled with awe. "Captain, this is unreal." Emily didn't answer. There was no room for awe. Every passenger's life depended on the next move. She focused, hands steady, eyes sharp. The ice beneath them creaked and groaned, a reminder that the frozen lake, while a miracle landing spot, was still treacherous. She adjusted the throttle, coaxing the remaining engine to maintain optimal power for the delicate glide over ice. The F-22 executed a tight formation, flying just above and to the side of Flight 319. Its engines roared, kicking up blasts of cold air and snow. Emily compensated for every gust, guiding the plane with a precision that would later be hailed as legendary. Sparks flew from the landing gear, but the plane remained stable. The pilot's voice came again over the secure channel. "Phoenix, Flight 319, maintain heading. Do not deviate. Trust the F-22's guidance. We are here to ensure safe passage to the reinforced zone. Prepare for close coordination." Emily nodded to Jamal. "Eyes open, every movement counts. Let's get them there safely." Outside, the world was a frozen, storm-tossed nightmare. The ice glistened under intermittent lightning, mountains loomed like jagged sentinels, and the F-22's shadow raced across the lake like a guardian angel, precise and unyielding. Flight 319, fragile and strained, followed Emily's hand with unwavering trust. And somewhere deep in the cockpit, Emily Harper, call sign Phoenix, realized the truth. Her skill had saved 183 lives from the storm, but now, under the watchful eye of the F-22, she was about to face a challenge that would test every ounce of courage, precision, and resolve she had ever possessed. The storm had been survived. The landing had been miraculous, but the sky was far from safe, and the next move would reveal just how extraordinary Captain Phoenix truly was. Emily Harper's hands were steady on the yoke, but her mind raced at lightning speed. Flight 319, fragile and strained after its miraculous ice landing, now had to move across the frozen lake to a secure, reinforced zone under the precise guidance of the F-22 above. Every adjustment, every subtle tilt, every inch of movement mattered. One slip, one gust, one misjudgment, and 183 lives could be lost in an instant. Phoenix, the F-22 pilot's voice crackled over the secure channel, calm yet commanding. Maintain heading. Keep lateral alignment. Ice integrity is stable but unforgiving. We will provide wind corrections. Follow precisely. Emily's jaw tightened. Understood. We're following your lead. Jamal, keep throttle steady. Microadjust on my mark. Watch altitude and heading closely. The frozen lake stretched before them, a silver runway marred by jagged cracks and patches of snow. Each subtle variation in the ice threatened to destabilize the plane. Emily adjusted the nose slightly, nudging the throttle to coax the single operational engine, carefully maintaining glide speed. Sparks flared briefly as landing gear scraped a rough patch of ice. The cabin trembled with the tension, passengers gripping armrests and each other, unaware of the precision maneuver taking place above their heads. Halfway across, Jamal reported, voice tight but controlled. Ice is holding, but one misstep and he didn't finish, but Emily understood the unspoken consequence. A catastrophic slide into jagged rocks, a frozen death trap. Emily focused, pushing adrenaline aside, channeling every ounce of skill, instinct, and training. We survive. We survive. We survive. She guided the plane in infinitesimal movements, feathering the throttle, tilting the yoke, compensating for every gust whipped up by the F-22 above. Lightning cracked across the horizon, illuminating the frozen lake, mountains, and circling F-22 in stark relief. Emily's eyes darted between the instruments and the approaching reinforced zone. It was barely wide enough for Flight 319's wingspan, bordered by steep ice ridges. She visualized every movement, every adjustment, every second of this high-stakes ballet. "Captain, the reinforced zone is in sight," Jamal said, voice trembling with awe and tension. "But the ice ahead, it's uneven, microfissures forming." Emily's stomach tightened. She exhaled slowly, keeping voice calm over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving to a secure area. Remain calm, stay seated, follow instructions. You are safe, almost there." In the cabin, murmurs of confusion and fear rippled through the passengers, but her calm delivery kept panic at bay. A young boy clutched his mother's arm, wide-eyed, while she whispered reassurances. An elderly man with a navy cap muttered prayers, gripping the seat. Emily's mind visualized every person, every heartbeat, fueling her determination to see them all through this ordeal. "F-22, I'm aligning with the next ice patch," Emily said. "Micro adjustments needed for heading correction." "Copy, Phoenix. Lateral wind gust detected, adjust 3 degrees left. Keep steady," the fighter pilot instructed. Emily nudged the yoke slightly, adjusting the plane with surgical precision. Sparks flared from the landing gear as the ice groaned under their weight. She kept speed minimal but sufficient, using the remaining engine to balance the glide. Every inch mattered. Every second was measured. Suddenly, a section of ice cracked audibly beneath the plane. Passengers gasped. Emily felt the vibration through the fuselage, a terrifying reminder that the margin for error was microscopic. "Micro-correction, Jamal. Shift slightly right, compensate for lateral slide," she shouted, her voice calm but urgent. Jamal responded instantly, adjusting throttle and rudder. Flight 319 tilted slightly, corrected, and held its trajectory. Emily exhaled in relief, barely, but knew the danger wasn't over. The reinforced zone was approaching, but it was narrow, bordered by jagged ice ridges that could shred the wings in an instant. Lightning illuminated the ice, showing cracks forming like veins under stress. Emily made a rapid calculation. The plane's momentum, weight, glide path, and wind from the F-22 above had to align perfectly to navigate the zone safely. One misstep, one misalignment, and catastrophe would strike. She leaned forward, hands dancing across the yoke, fingers adjusting micro-movements with precision honed by adrenaline and experience. Hold steady," she muttered, eyes locked on the instruments, then forward to the narrow strip of reinforced ice. "Phoenix, final approach," the F-22 pilot instructed. Zone is 500 meters ahead. Maintain glide speed. Micro-corrections critical. Confirm visual alignment. Emily nodded, even though the pilot couldn't see her. Visual confirmed. Lateral adjustments in progress. Hold throttle steady, Jamal. The plane glided, trembling as the ice below shifted slightly. Sparks flared from contact points. Passengers held their breath, some instinctively covering eyes. Emily's pulse pounded as she guided Flight 319 like a vessel through a stormy river, balancing speed, weight, and angle with razor-sharp precision. The reinforced zone loomed ahead, metallic barriers and reinforced ice slabs, designed for emergencies but barely wide enough. Emily nudged the plane forward, calculating angles, glancing at Jamal's instruments. "Adjust 3 degrees left, then maintain," she instructed. The plane shifted slightly, corrected. Sparks flared as metal scraped rough ice. The landing gear groaned, but Flight 319 remained upright. Emily's jaw tightened. Every inch was critical now. Passengers whispered prayers, some crying quietly. Mothers clutched children tighter. The Navy-capped man muttered under his breath, gripping the armrest. They were unaware of the fine-tuned, life-or-death ballet happening above their heads. Emily's eyes darted forward. The final stretch. The reinforced ice zone. One mistake now and the miracle would be undone. She adjusted pitch slightly, nudged throttle, and guided Flight 319 toward the narrow strip. The F-22 hovered momentarily, engines roaring, providing precise wind corrections. Emily followed its guidance perfectly, each micro-movement calculated to maintain alignment and balance. Almost there," she whispered. And then Flight 319 touched down fully on the reinforced ice. The plane shuddered as the tires met solid, stable ground. Sparks flared briefly, but the aircraft held. Emily maintained control, gently coasting forward until the plane came to a trembling, safe stop. Silence fell over the frozen lake, a fragile, miraculous calm. Passengers gasped, some crying, some hugging loved ones. Emily and Jamal exhaled, muscles trembling, hearts pounding. Flight 319 had survived not one, but 2 near-impossible trials, the storm and the treacherous frozen landing. The F-22 descended slightly, its pilot's voice calm but approving over the secure channel. "Phoenix, Flight 319, exceptional execution. All passengers accounted for. You have demonstrated skill beyond measure." Emily's pulse finally slowed slightly. "Copy, understood. Thank you for the support." She leaned back, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. But even as adrenaline ebbed, her eyes scanned the horizon. The storm had passed, the F-22 had confirmed their safety, but Emily knew that the world would remember this as more than just a landing. It was proof of courage, skill, and determination under impossible odds. She glanced at Jamal. "We did it. Every single one of them is alive." Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. I can't believe it. You saved all of them, Emily, miraculously." Emily's lips curved in a small, exhausted smile. "We did it together, but there's still debriefing, paperwork, questions, and 183 people who will never forget today." And as the F-22 flew a protective circle above them, Emily Harper, call sign Phoenix, realized the truth. She had not only faced the storm and impossible odds but had earned a place in history. But somewhere deep in her mind, she knew one thing. Life had a way of testing even the strongest, and the sky could always demand more. The frozen lake lay silent under a pale winter sky, the storm finally spent. Flight 319 rested on the reinforced ice, its fuselage trembling from the ordeal but intact. Emily Harper sat in the cockpit, hands still resting lightly on the yoke, her chest heaving with exhaustion and relief. The passengers were safe, 183 lives, preserved against impossible odds. For a moment, the weight of the day pressed on her like a physical force. Jamal leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow, eyes wide with awe. "I still can't believe it," he whispered. "You saved all of them, Phoenix. I've never seen anything like it." Emily allowed herself a small, tired smile. "We saved them, Jamal, together. That's what counts." The F-22 hovered briefly overhead, then signaled a slow departure, its pilot acknowledging their successful coordination. Emily watched the sleek fighter jet disappear into the winter clouds, a silent guardian that had ensured their survival. She finally allowed herself to relax, letting the tension ebb from her muscles. Emergency crews had already begun to arrive, guiding passengers safely off the icy runway and onto waiting vehicles. Families reunited, tears flowing freely, embraces tight and heartfelt. Emily walked through the cabin, checking on everyone, listening to their thanks and relief. Mothers clutched children, young adults shook hands with strangers, and even the elderly Navy-capped man looked at her with profound respect. One young boy tugged at her sleeve, wide-eyed. "Miss, you saved us, right? You're like a superhero." Emily knelt, meeting his gaze. "I just did what I had to do," she said softly. "And I had a great team helping me. Remember that it's teamwork that saves lives." But even as the gratitude of the passengers washed over her, Emily couldn't ignore the deeper significance of what had happened. Her call sign, Phoenix, had been revealed during the crisis, a name tied to elite military recognition, classified operations, and a symbol of resilience. Somehow, the storm and the crisis had thrust her into the spotlight without her intention. As she exited the aircraft, cameras from media helicopters hovering in the distance captured every moment. News crews had converged on the frozen lake, drawn by reports of an extraordinary emergency landing. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust toward her. Emily raised a hand, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "I am Captain Emily Harper, call sign Phoenix," she began, speaking clearly and calmly. "Flight 319 has landed safely. Every passenger is accounted for. This was a team effort, and I am grateful for my co-pilot, the crew, and the emergency response teams who made this possible. We faced extreme conditions, but together, we ensured that everyone survived." The cameras panned across the frozen lake, showing emergency vehicles, snow-covered ice, and 183 relieved passengers being led to safety. Behind her, the mountains loomed like silent witnesses to the extraordinary ordeal. News anchors would later describe the event as miraculous. Social media exploded with videos, live feeds, and posts, all documenting the incredible landing, the coordination with the F-22, and the revelation of Emily's call sign, Phoenix. The name became a symbol of courage, precision, and calm under extreme pressure. Later, in a temporary command center set up on the edge of the frozen lake, Emily was debriefed by NORAD and federal aviation authorities. They praised her skill, professionalism, and courage, but also drilled into her the significance of the call sign being revealed during the crisis. The secrecy surrounding Phoenix had been breached by necessity, and now she was both a civilian hero and a figure of military recognition. "Captain Harper," one official said, voice measured, "your actions today prevented the loss of 183 lives. You demonstrated extraordinary judgment under conditions that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. Your call sign, Phoenix, is now known, and it represents courage, resilience, and precision beyond measure. You have set a new standard." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. Praise and recognition were not why she flew, but she understood the magnitude of the event. She had risen from the chaos, the storm, and the impossible ice landing, proving not only her skill but the essence of leadership, calm, courage, and commitment to others. Jamal approached, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. "Phoenix, it suits you. You're literally rising from the storm and saving everyone." Emily allowed herself a soft laugh, the first genuine release since the ordeal began. "I suppose it does. But today wasn't about me. It was about every person on Flight 319, and about the crew who never let go of hope. Later, as the last passengers were safely transported to nearby shelters and emergency accommodations, Emily took a moment to walk alone along the edge of the frozen lake. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across the snow and ice. The frozen lake, once a treacherous trap, now glimmered as a testament to survival. Every reflection of light on the ice seemed to echo the collective heartbeat of the lives saved that day. Emily closed her eyes, letting the wind whip against her face. She thought of every passenger, the mother with the child, the elderly man in the navy cap, the young couple clasping hands in fear, the businessman who had muttered silent prayers. Each person was alive because she had acted decisively, without hesitation, with courage sharpened by experience and instinct. And somewhere in the sky above, she imagined the F-22 flying in silent tribute, a guardian that had witnessed her rise. The call sign Phoenix, once just a name, had become a living symbol of rebirth, resilience, and courage under pressure. As helicopters lifted media crews and emergency response units departed, Emily turned back toward Flight 319. The aircraft, battered but intact, rested like a monument to human skill and determination. She smiled softly, a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. Today had been a battle against nature, against mechanical failure, and against fear itself. And they had won. Later, in interviews and social media posts, the story would circulate widely. She saved 183 passengers. Then the F-22 revealed her call sign. Videos showed the frozen lake landing, the precision glide, the F-22 circling above, and her calm, commanding presence. Emily Harper, Phoenix, was hailed as a hero, but she remained grounded, knowing that heroism was not just about recognition. It was about action, courage, and commitment when it mattered most. That night, after ensuring all passengers were safe and debriefed, Emily returned to her quarters. She sat quietly, replaying the events of the day. She thought of the storm, the ice landing, the coordination with the F-22, and the courage of everyone involved. She allowed herself a rare moment of reflection and gratitude. In her heart, she knew this would not be the last time she faced impossible odds, but she also knew with certainty that no matter the storm, no matter the challenge, she had the courage and skill to rise. Phoenix had emerged not just as a call sign, but as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the unyielding will to protect life against all odds. And somewhere above, perhaps in the clouds, perhaps in the sky itself, the F-22 had witnessed it all, the birth of a legend. Emily Harper rose, shoulders straight, eyes sharp, and heart steady. She had saved 183 lives, navigated the impossible, and proven that courage, skill, and composure under pressure could overcome even the most extraordinary circumstances. The world now knew her as Phoenix, and the world would never forget the day a captain rose from the storm to save them all.